without further ado, Reem, please, love to hear what you have to say.
Hi, thank you, Judian. Hi, everyone. Okay, so the idea for this kind of, uh, if you want, workshop or little masterclass came from my research, and it really focuses on character development for a story. So that comes from the perspective of characters' motivational interests. And there are two sides to this. There's the motives that a character would be able to tell you about. So um, they are interested in, let's say, advancing their career, or they're interested in building their family and their relationships. And this is what we would call their explicit motive, so the motive that they are aware of. And there are, however, motives that they are not aware of, which we call implicit motives. And so sometimes there's a divide between these two. They may have motives they are not aware of, and so they will not set goals to that are consistent with their non-conscious motives. And so the idea with this workshop is to kind of build a framework that can guide the character development along these lines. So when we talk about developing a character arc in a story, we talk about what we want to see happen for the character throughout the story. How is their personality going to develop? How are they going to move themselves forward in the world and learn and um, become happier as human beings? And so this model will give us some tools to look at that. There's a third aspect that could be integrated, which is the aspect of their skills and or their abilities. And with that, you can add another layer of complexity. But for the moment, for this talk, I'm going to really be focusing on the first two. So if you PTR, you can see a little visual with the main areas of focus. So there's the implicit motive. Very often, people will talk about what the heart wants. There's the explicit motive, which is what the head wants, the goals that we set. And then there's the skills and the abilities. And in someone who is a little bit more fragmented, these three areas may not be very close together. They may not overlap very much. But as the story progresses, we would want to move the character through a process that will bring them a little bit closer to what they want. So, for example, I'm going to upload another little visual. So if you PTR, you should be able to see now there's a little bit more overlap. So they're bringing the different parts of themselves a little bit closer together. And then the ultimate goal, hopefully by the end of the story, would be that the character would have much more overlap between what their heart wants, their implicit motive. So you can PTR again, their implicit motive, what their head wants, their explicit motives, and their abilities. So they would be developing their skills so that they can do what they want to do in life. So this just gives us a little bit of a framework, and all of this translates into behaviors. So this is the background, but what we would see in the story would be specific behaviors that reflect these underlying motives. So, any questions at this point? I don't want to lose anyone. If I'm not expressing myself clearly, please let me know. Okay, so there are differences beyond the conscious unconscious. There is the ability to introspect. So the character would be able to know themselves for their explicit motives. They know that that's what they want, but for their implicit motive, they would not be able to articulate what they want. They would not be able to go within themselves and figure out what it is that they want. And there's also a difference in the kinds of incentives that would trigger behaviors related to these motives. So the incentives that trigger behavior for the explicit motives tend to be more social and more extrinsically oriented, or the situations would be more social and more extrinsically oriented. But the implicit motives are triggered more by nonverbal imagery and more intrinsically oriented. The behavior would be for explicit motives, so the goals, they would be planned behaviors. So let's say a student has an exam the next day, they will plan to study a certain number of hours the day before so that they're ready for their exam. But and that would be related to wanting to achieve, and I'll get into more of the content of the motives in a second. But an implicit motive is behavior that happens in the moment. Something triggers it and it happens spontaneously. It's not planned behavior. And it may be a little bit less controlled also. So these kinds of behaviors may be things that can be incorporated into a story and into situations and scenarios that will kind of convey how a character's psyche is oriented and is organized. So all of these motives have specific content as well. So for example, there are three main areas. There's an area that's related to achievement, so a concern for mastery and wanting to excel. So that character who's very career oriented has a very high achievement motive. If given that they've put goals related to their career progression, would tell us that they have an explicit motive that's career oriented. Their implicit motive may or may not be high, and that would be reflected in their behavior in unstructured situations. So if, for example, that student who's studying for an exam gets a call and gets invited to a party, in the moment, what would be their decision? Will they drop their studies and go to the party? In which case, maybe their affiliation motive is stronger than their achievement motive. So they impulsively take the decision to go to a party instead of just sitting down and focusing on their studies. So that's the kind of behavior that we would see happen in someone who's not so well integrated in their different types of motives. All right, so the other types of motivational content that we can talk about are the affiliation orientation and the power orientation. So when we talk about affiliation, it's a concern for forming and keeping or recovering pleasant relationships with others. And in this case, we would see this in expressions of friendly discussions and caring about people, and someone feeling sad or having negative feelings about being separated from someone, a relationship getting disrupted for one reason or another. And these types of relationships are really focused on being compassionate, wanting to enjoy someone's company, and with no ulterior motives. So no interest for advancing a career or networking for business sake. It's really focused on developing a relationship because there is enjoyment that's coming from the relationship, and not because there is a more tangible or rather more materialistic outcome. So there is we see this a lot in stories. Very often stories revolve around relationships. And then there is another type of content for motives. There is a power content. So power, a character who's focused on power is someone who will take strong and forceful action. They may want or try to control a situation, regulate someone else's behavior, give unsolicited advice. They will try to impress, so mentions of fame, prestige, and so on. So a character who is striving to become famous has a power orientation. And this could happen without them being aware of it being an important thing to them. So it's something that can be shown in the story without actually explicitly stating it, and it's shown by their behavior. So if we're writing a story, let's say that's more contemporary and may talk about social media, so a character who's very concerned about how many likes and shares they're getting on their social media posts, maybe someone who is power motivated. If they go out of their way to make sure, so it's a goal for them to make sure that this is happening, then they are explicitly aware of this motive, but they may not be aware of this motive. And so we can play with these kinds of interactions and behaviors, and if a character is contradicting themselves, then they're more likely to be fragmented. But through the story, we would be able to bring them to a more integrated state where they're able to do this, to have behaviors that are consistent with their goals and have better outcomes for themselves. Okay, so this was the main aspect that I wanted to share. We could discuss maybe some examples. Would you like to kind of chime in with me here? Maybe give me examples from something you've read that would show an integrated character or a fragmented character. I would love for this to become more of an interactive discussion if I haven't used up all my time yet. And so, Judy, how are we doing on time?
Well, I think we're doing pretty well. We probably just have another couple, well, about a good, 3 or 4 minutes here. um, and I was wondering, do you have some examples of each of those from something modern? You know,
Sure. Well, Ngozi, can I give an example from the beginning of your story?
Ooh, please do.
Okay, so we see Sheila, the main character in Ngozi's story, going back to work after she has lost her mother, and she goes for breakfast with her boss. And so let me ask you, what kind of situation is this? Is she going for breakfast for affiliation reasons? Is that type of time affiliation oriented for her?
Yeah, it's responsibility. It's definitely not pleasure. It's not a power play. It's just ticking off the box of what it means to be employed.
Right. So it's much more oriented towards responsibility, maybe to take care of her career. So there's a little bit of achievement there. But then something happens during that meeting, and we see uh, a power dynamic kind of evolve. And she takes a decision in the moment. And so she gets her boss gives her a sort of tries to pressure her by applying a power tactic, and she rebels against that and um, does her own power play to kind of reclaim her power. And so uh, it's the fact that it happens in the moment, she didn't plan on it. It tells us that it's more implicitly driven. So her decision is much more implicitly driven. So, and goes, I don't want to give away your story. So if you want to say more about it, feel free, but I'm not going to go into more details. So,
I'll just say Sheila has a little wee problem with authority.
yes. And so she may have a power motive that she's not quite aware of. And so she does take actions that are impulsive, but they are really driven from her heart and not from her head. So that's one example. Maybe it's a little bit vague because we didn't go into all the details. You'll have to get Ngozai's book to tell to learn the full story. But another example would be that student who, instead of studying for their exam in the moment, they decide to drop their studies, maybe take a break, go out for a coffee with their friend, but then they're really enjoying being with their friend and they just hang out for longer, and then they find themselves in a situation where they haven't really studied for their exam. So even though their goal may be to have an A in all of their exams, that kind of behavior did not come naturally to them. So explicit motive driven behavior is effortful. They have to apply an effort to perform that behavior, and the effort would have been to resist that call to go out and have fun with friends and to just sit down and focus on studying. The implicit motive for affiliation is this need to be with others. That kind of behavior comes very easily to a person. So it was easy to just pick up and go and have fun with their friends, and it was easy to just stay and hang out with their friends, to the detriment of their studying. So does that help, Judea,
That
and
is
everyone else?
great. Great examples and great food for thought. Thank you so much, Reem. I love that. Um, and thank you for using Ngozai's
You're
book
welcome.
as an example and bringing that up, because that is something else we are celebrating this week is the publication of Ngozai's first novel. You can see the cover in her profile pic, in my profile pic. It is available on Amazon and has very strong, compelling characters and plot, and it's really great. So thank you, Reem, so much. That was awesome.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And it was easy to do because
Yes.
I was reading Ngozai's story this morning and it just came up and I was like, oh, this is such a perfect example for me. So yeah, thank you, Ngozai.
Oh, my pleasure. And Anita, I gotta say, I love your PTR pic.
Thank you. Some guy was hitting on me, so I figured I'd put that in there since we're talking about horror, and I guess that will deter him, huh?
And that's a great segue into Anita's talk about horror and suspense writing. Take it away, Anita.
Hello. So PTR to see my monster. This is what I'm thinking about when I'm writing horror. This is what I'm seeing. Some ridiculous creature that's about to eat you. Um, I like to take people on a ride, and preferably a ride that they didn't want to get on, but enjoyed it after the fact. Um, I like to for example, since my birthday is a week before Halloween, I make all my friends go to a haunted house. And I get a kick out of watching them scream and squirm, and they had such a good time. Nobody wanted to go, mind you, but they had such a good time after the fact. Um, so there's that. Um, it also helps to have a morbid curiosity, and it helps to distance yourself from what's going on. And how did this start? Think about when you were a kid and you watched Tom and Jerry. I actually keep track of how many times Tom gets killed in Tom and Jerry. And this is a kid show that I watched when I was a kid. So I'll give you some examples. Tom froze to death. Tom was guillotined. Tom was blown up, and he was shown on a cloud using a harp. He was sitting on a cloud and he was using a harp. Tom digs his own grave because he was trying to dodge an anvil, and it bashes him and he falls in the hole that he dug for himself. And the anvil becomes the tombstone. So this is where all of this started. I think horror is funny. And when I'm writing horror, these are the things that I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about an actual person being murdered. I'm thinking about some ridiculous imagery in my head. And I think it helps to be dramatic and have a really weird sense of humor, and to be creative. Um, this is what I see when I write horror. And that's why sometimes I can't even contain my laughter. I know you guys probably remember when I'm trying to read a horror story and I can't. I'm giggling the whole time because I think it's funny. Um, do I think murder is funny? No. I watch the news and I don't laugh. That's real life. That's not funny. But when you can separate that from your writing, I think that's when you can be in your element. Um, for example, true crime. I can write about true crime because to me, even though it is real, it is, I look at it sometimes as not real because you hear about it so much and you see documentaries, you see YouTube videos, you see stories about this stuff, and it kind of makes it like it's a novel. You're just getting the next chapter of that novel. So I can absorb that and write about it like, it's nothing. Um, the human element is removed because I know so many details. It's scarier when you don't know what happened, and there are not many clues to speculate on what's going on. It's the fear of the unknown. And I do understand that horror is not everyone's cup of tea. Um, But for me, and this helps to be, to write in horror. I can watch a horror movie by myself at night in the dark and then sleep like a baby, not like nothing is going on. Like I watched, some kid's lullaby thing on TV. It's absolutely nothing to me. It's entertainment. Um, I can look at real death photos that are gruesome without flinching. However, this is not what's in my mind when I'm writing horror at all. I'm thinking of the Cthulhu that's in my image there. Um, Fear, a healthy sense of fear is always helpful. But there are some things that I can't write about, and everybody has their limits. So for some people, horror in general is their limit, and I understand that. But what I fear that I don't write about, which I think is interesting, is I fear, but I do write about is dying a gruesome death. I can write that until the end of time, but that's my fear of dying a gruesome death and being dismembered and all of that kind of foolishness. I fear that, but I write about that all the time. You will often hear me lopping off somebody's head in my writing. Um, Taking any of my fantasy and talking about fantasy and making it writing for me is therapeutic. I can get think of anything else. So of course it has to be action packed in order to keep me thinking about it and not other things. For the true crime aspect of the horror writing, it gives me a lot of material to work with. Like yesterday, we wrote about true crime, and I used John Bonet as my example when I wrote about that and what I think happened, and that can be therapeutic. And let me tell you why it can be therapeutic, because I feel like when I'm writing what happened, I feel like I've gotten some justice for someone who can't speak for themselves. Letting people know what I think happened, because that's the case is unsolved. We don't know what happened. Sometimes the only justice you can get is having people believe that a person has done what they've done, even though they're not actually being punished for it. Just the thought that people think that they've done this is all the justice you'll get. To me, it's like, aha, you've been caught. I know what you did. And I can use some of that in my writing. I do draw a line on animals and babies. And you probably never heard me write anything about any hurting of babies um, or animals, because that's something where I just can't do that. So I do have a limit. um, So at some point in your writing, even if you haven't, I know I try to encourage you guys to do this, but in some point in your writing, you may want to kill somebody. So I want to give you some tips that I find helpful. And I'm actually going to use some from an actual author also, but here's mine. The more extreme, the easier it is to separate yourself from it, because these are the least likely things to happen. So like, for example, I had a monster on top of a bus, and it was pulling people out of the bus and, biting their heads off and stuff like that. What are the chances of that actually happening? So I can write that and make the monster do all kinds of gruesome stuff, because it's likely not going to happen. Another fun thing to use in writing horror is to use a dismembered part for something. Use a dismembered part to, like, you can eat it. You can use it as a weapon. You can, wave it around in the air and scare people with it. So those are my tips for writing horror. But R.L. Stein has some tips also, and I did a master class with him. He's usually targeting the young adults, but what he says is the secret to making something scary is to write from the first person because it's scarier to be in the protagonist's shoes. Everything he or she sees and hears, smells, you are right there, taking a ride with them. When something happens to the reader, you are right there. You've taken them with you on this experience, this horror. They're viewing this horror close up. That's the secret to being scary in one sentence, according to him. Other things he says is to make people in authority useless. And I tend to do that in my writing too. Like the parents and the police, they if it's a kid that's the focus of the story, then make the parents idiots. If there's somebody killing everybody, or there's a monster, let him eat the police officer first, or the big burly guy who looks like he can fight, let them get killed first. That's always fun. You have to create. I think, and he also mentions this. You have to create protagonists readers see in themselves, and put that protagonist in a lot of trouble. So those are the tips that I have for writing horror and how I separate myself from it. What do you guys think?
I love that. That's fantastic, Anita. And I always have loved and love how you just have so much fun when you're writing, it sounds like. And I thought that came out today too, that creativity and
Thank you.
really digging into that.
Thank you. I think in order to do it and do it often, you have to enjoy it. And laughing is the best medicine for almost anything. So enjoy.
I also like how you talked about the dose of scariness and kind of alluding to not being scary for the sake of being scary, but taking your listener on a ride. And it made me think of like spicy food. Like there's sometimes it's just spicy for the shock and awe of it, but it's not enjoyable. And there's some sources of heat that it takes you on this journey and this ride. And I think that's the really great thing about your horror writing. And you get that wittiness and that humor because you've taken us on a ride. Like we get it, we know you've drawn us in, we know what's gonna entail here. Like you're scared with that anticipation, but you don't feel fearful like you do when you're watching or reading some horror. And that's what makes, I think, your work so enjoyable.
Thank you.
Liz came in with a food metaphor, and she's my favorite person now.
Always.
That was so
Always.
great, Liz.
I
And I,
love
I
your talk, Anita.
thank you. I think you know what I think sometimes when I laugh, I think what I'm writing is more consumable because um, you can't help but laugh at me, laugh at myself.
Very true.
So that's me.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Anita. That was great. Okay.
Thank you.
And yeah, if there are any other questions, we have a few more minutes. Anyone? Heather, do you have a question?
Hi. I I came in late, so I didn't really know what the topic was.
Yeah, we are sharing thoughts about the writing process. Reem shared thoughts about creating characters and character development, and Anita just shared her thoughts about horror writing, suspense writing, and her process. And now we're going to go into a discussion of screenwriting from Jennifer, who is working on her. Is this, Jennifer, is this your first screenplay, did you say? Very cool.
It is.
So
It is
great.
indeed.
Yeah. All right, exciting. Thanks again, Anita and Reem. And now, Jennifer, please take it away.
So, hello, beautiful souls. Grand evening from London. I'm Jennifer Nicole, an emerging screenwriter, and I love all things storytelling. I create stories that matter and mean something to the world, stories that my ancestors and generations before me could not tell. And I am here with you today to discuss all things screenwriting. Just to let you all know that this session will be recorded. So let us begin. What is screenwriting? Screenwriting is a form of storytelling by writing scripts for feature films, television, or even video games. With screenwriting, it's important to always be your own best advocate. You do not need anybody's permission to pursue the career you want for yourself. Everything starts with a script, and with the lockdown and the corona pandemic, this is the perfect time to promote your skills and your work. If you do want to get into screenwriting, I do suggest entering competitions, promoting your writing through other means such as Medium or WordPress, or even create a website of your own and put all your works on there and just get it all out in the world. You can also use Clubhouse to network, which is what I've been doing. It is pretty helpful to me. I have met producers, directors, and other writers. And now, thanks to Clubhouse, I even have a new mentor guiding me on my screenwriting journey. You can use any type of story you have and turn it into a script. Even if it is a short story or a children's story, you can still turn it into a short film. With every story, it does need a theme, characters, and of course a plot story structure. You need to know your beginning, middle, and end. How do you want your story to look like, sound like even, and be seen by hundreds of people everywhere? There are different components to screenwriting. Once you have your story, you're going to have to map it out by doing an outline or a beat sheet, which is just pretty much how does your story look act by act. A brief summary, which can be very helpful to you as the writer, as a way of reminding you how the story will go, and also those reading your script so they can follow along to how it will all look like in the end. You don't need to go to university. Well, I mean, you can do. But from what I've heard on Clubhouse, it's not worth it because, again, yes, well done for learning the theory side of it. But when you get out of uni or college, it's not the same. It's more practical based. If you want to be a writer, you can get a fellowship, work in the writer's room, have a script ready to send to anyone at a moment's notice. You do need a good personality. You do have to be polite and enjoyable to work with and have tons of enthusiasm. Even if they are the cameraman or even the intern, please be respectful to them. What else? Oh, how I got into it. So, how I got into screenwriting was through a spiritual kind of way. So, okay, so picture the scene. I'm on the train getting back from work, and I get back home to my house. I lie in the bed, and suddenly the room starts spinning, and I have a vision. And I see a particular god. I see a child running down the hallway in the big house, and he's picking her up. And then I see this particular goddess, whose story I'm currently writing about, says to me, I have a story to tell and I need you to tell it. You're the only one that can do it. And so I got to work, but nothing really stuck out to me as such. I kept asking this particular goddess to show me how can I tell her story and how she would like it to be shown. And so she would show it to me like a movie that's playing on the wall using those projectors that cinemas use, and I'll write about it. And that's how I came into writing the fantasy story that I'm doing now. I do have many unfinished scripts in my computer because once the gates were open, I had numerous people who were in the heavenly world in the other side of the 3D world we call Earth asking me to write their stories too. So it has been a process. Um, what else can I talk about? Oh, yes, you need to be careful and ask yourself how much is it going to cost to shoot all the scenes, because when it gets to the filming stage, the producers and directors do look at the budget for the entire film, and if there is no wiggle room to add it in, they will ask you, do you really need this scene? What is the purpose of it? And try to find a way to cut it out completely. So going back to talking about acts, acts is pretty much referring to Act 1, your beginning, Act 2, your middle, and Act 3, your end. If it ends on a cliffhanger, like most feature screenplays sometimes do, that is okay. You don't need to go crazy about it, trying to tie it all together. You can just justify it in the next series, if it's a TV show, or in a follow-up like a trilogy for doing a feature film. I am currently writing a fantasy feature film screenplay. It's my first draft, which I've been working on for about 2.5 years, on and off, due to work and not really finding the time to fully immerse myself into it. Then lockdown came and I was able to walk away from a toxic job and fully put everything into this creative process. It wasn't easy because sometimes the characters of my journey don't want to tell me how they got there or where they are going, which is very frustrating, especially as a writer. But I have learned, that if you want to write a screenplay, you need patience and a whole lot of fun. Because for me, in order to bring forth my ideas from my mind onto the page, is to be in a state of fun and joy. I have my creative music playlist playing in the background. And for me, that is just a perfect way for me to be in the moment. Yeah. Oh, tips. So, okay, a tip I would say is be confident. Never apologize for your goals, ambitions, passions, your ideas, or what you can bring to the table. Someone has to do your dream job and it might as well be you. You're smart, you're capable, you're resilient, and you can be a screenwriter if you choose to be. I would say be open to feedback in all forms. One person judging your script may think that it's a genius work, while other people may think it's trash. It's not a right or a wrong form of criticism, but take it all in your stride, because even bad feedback can help you grow as a writer. And never dismiss any kind of feedback as a way to say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Because I believe that every feedback is a learning curve for you. Even if you don't see it now, you will, and you can use it later on down the line. What else? Oh, okay, yeah. For a new writer starting out, what helped me was doing an online course called Introduction to Screenwriting with the University of East Anglia, which is in the UK, just to get the basic theory of it all, understand how a screenwriting is done, how scripts work. Clubhouse helped me a lot, like rooms such as Screenwriting 101 or Logline Wednesday. Reading lots of scripts, which you can find on scriptslug.com. And for those that don't know, a logline is a brief summary which should be around one line or two of the plot that happens in the movie. For example, if you were to do a logline of The Godfather, it would be an aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his empire to his reluctant son. Loglines should be punchy and short and grab people's attention, but also pretty much sum up the plot of what happens in the film. If you've ever suffered writer's block, it can be tough because you're thinking about deadlines and getting it done. But sometimes the best way to beat it is just to forget about it and do something you love. Just be in the moment of that particular day with no worries or fear. And I guarantee you that you'll be out and about doing your thing, and little pieces of golden nuggets of information will just pop up in your mind, and you'll just sit there or stand there thinking to yourself, damn, that would be a great thing for like a second act. Or you'll hear something on the radio or on TV and you'll think, wow, that would be a great line of dialogue. So to wrap up everything, screenwriting is a process and a journey that one goes on besides their characters. You should always be in the moment and write from your heart. Don't worry about the finish line. You'll get there when you're supposed to get there. Age is not a factor, and I believe that screenwriting is a visual process. And as long as you have just that, the vision of your story and the stamina, you can definitely write and bring your story to life. Thank you for listening. I'm Jennifer Nicole, and I'm fully complete in my goddess energy. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Jennifer. All of it. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. I thank you so much. I see that Tyron's in the listening lounge. I'd love to invite him onto the stage. He is a writer and a TEDx speaker who is also working on a screenplay. And I'd love to hear his thoughts on his screenplay process and how he got started and what being a writer means to him.
Hey, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Yeah, thanks for pulling me up. I was having a good time listening and taking notes. I guess real quick, and I'll be real brief. I guess some of the things, and Anita got my attention when she mentioned R.L. Stein, the master class. I also took his master class along with James Patterson. Two really great masterclasses. They're talking about writing books. However, those skills are applicable to across a few different mediums. But the one thing that I will share, the one thing that I've learned has been phenomenal, whether I'm writing a screenplay, a play, or anything, or audio work like I'm doing here for Clubhouse. I do an audio show, a scripted show, an audio drama weekly here on the app as part of the Clubhouse Creator First program. Every time I approach a story, it begins with an outline. Now, there's no right or wrong way. You'll find 50 different writers, and each of them will have 50 different processes. But for me, I believe in doing a very, very detailed outline and working on that and getting that tight so that I know where I'm going. Could you imagine going on a road trip, right? And you don't have a map? You're going to probably get there. You might have some happy accidents. You might see some cool things along the road. But for me, I like to be a little bit more efficient. I like to just get straight there. So to ensure that I get right where I'm going, I take a lot of time in crafting a very detailed and tight outline. And from that outline, I revise it and make sure that it's right. And so that way, when I'm not doing all that hard stuff when I finally start to write the script, and I can relax a little bit and just enjoy the process. And still, when I write that script, there's always still going to be some revisions there. But I guess I would say the outline is one tip I would offer that has just been the most phenomenal thing to me is the outline. And then one other quick thing, making sure that everything that's happening in the story is moving the story forward. Sometimes as writers, we have little stuff that we like to throw in, right? Little lines that we like just because they sound good or we like them or we think they're clever, or little moments that are interesting that we feel are going to be really, really cool to see or for the reader to read. But in reality, I think sometimes we got to put our ego aside and really ask the question, but does this serve the story? I think it was Arthur Hemingway. I don't want to get this right, but he said, when you write something, cut out all the good stuff and see if it still works. And that's what I try to do and make sure that everything is really tight and that the story, everything that's happening is moving the story forward. Anyway, thank you for bringing me up again, Jennifer, and everybody for this awesome space. And I'm going to go on mute. Thank you.
Here, like, how your experiences are similar to mine. So that was nice. So thank you so much, Tyron.
So, Jennifer, I have a question. I am curious what you would say are the if someone who's used to writing um, fictional prose is might be interested in dipping their toe into screenwriting. What is the biggest challenge that someone who's used to writing just prose has to overcome or has to address if they're looking to do screenwriting?
That is a good question. I mean, one of the challenges I can think of is description. I think with authors, they are very, very descriptive in their surroundings, whereas in screenwriting, it's more about less is more. And especially in like all the action lines, it's just like a show but not tell. So you can't really say, oh, so and so punched X, Y, and Z, and then he fell on the floor and all the blood was there. It's more of like a basic analogy of how would the punch look like, as opposed to, oh, so and so punched X, Y, and Z, if that makes any sense.
What is it about screenwriting that you, as opposed to different kinds of writing and creation, that draws you to it, as opposed to poetry or being a novelist? What is it that pulls you into that particular format?
That is also a very good question in Gozai. I think for me, it's more of the fact that I can I can emerge myself and become one of the characters if I wanted to. I'm quite a visual person as opposed to just getting it all out on the page and just writing whatever comes through my head. I can definitely immerse myself fully in the story. So, as someone who can see as opposed to, well, I can also hear. Yeah, so okay, as someone who can see and who's like quite clairvoyant, I can definitely travel into that particular time period and see how will that story play out. But I can't do that when I'm writing like fiction novels or stuff like that. And for me, that's a huge difference. And I would love to do it with fiction novels and just write a whole novel, just trying to put myself in that particular character's shoes. But I think it's harder to do.
That's very awesome. And it from everything you said, and it sounds like, yeah, you are a visual person. You think visually when you were starting to tell your story on how you got into this, how you started writing. You said, picture the scene. And I just thought, wow, that's powerful. That's someone who's very visual and taking us into her world. So I love that.
Thank you so much, Judy. Yeah, I'm quite a visual person because I'm quite clairvoyant. So I tend to ask myself, okay, if I was this particular character, say in a period before Christ in Rome, how would that look? If I was standing right next to the Colosseum, how would that look in that particular time period? And I can like differentiate the difference between now and back then. So yeah, I'm quite visual. So thank you so much, Judy.
Absolutely. I want to invite anyone in the audience to come on up if you have a question or comment. Um, we had three fantastic speakers. Jennifer, who just spoke about screenwriting, Anita, who spoke about horror writing, suspense writing, and Reem, who spoke about character development. Um,
Excuse me,
Oh,
Judy, can
please,
I
Liz,
interrupt for a
yes.
second? Just wanted to remind everyone in the room that this is our first writing retreat and we're looking for feedback on how to improve. And in the bio of the Creative Juice Bar, you will find the survey link. If you can take some time and complete that, it's about 4 questions. We would greatly appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. I'm Liz and I am done speaking.
Great. Thank you, Liz. And this is Judy Ann again. And I just want for anyone who hasn't been with us before or doesn't know what we do, as Liz said, this is our first writer's retreat. But every day during the week, we have 2 different 1-hour sessions where we meet at 8 a.m. Eastern Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Time to do writing exercises, to talk about the writing process, and connect with our creative muse. Um, it's a it's a great group. Everyone on stage is part of that and is a regular contributor, regular community member, and it is a community. So please join us. Please, if you haven't followed us already, just hit the little green house by Creative Juice Bar, and we'd love to have you with us. And our next session today is a writing session for community members, which we'll go to in a little bit, in just a minute or two. I do also just want to give so much gratitude to Yvette Walker, who couldn't be here today. Unfortunately, she and I started this club, and she helped develop everything in the club as well, including the Writers Retreat. And along with Jennifer and Anita and Liz and Ngozai um, for really sinking their teeth into constructing this weekend and envisioning it, and then to everyone in the group who also contributed ideas for sessions and writing prompts and just kind of fill our creative cup as I don't know, I'm taking Liz's thought and Liz's cup idea every day, and how much I appreciate that, and I appreciate every single person who has been in the club. So again, I invite anyone for any comment or question before we close this part of the retreat and move on to writing.
And everyone here can join us in that room.
Everyone who
Is that
follows
correct,
the
Judy?
club, yes. It is a closed room, so it's a safe room. We have space to write, and we're going to take about 45 minutes to write, and that can be on anything you want. If you have a project going, if you want to start something, as Tyron said, if you want to kind of start thinking about the outline of a screenplay, of a story, it's time to do that. I know yesterday we had um, a 30-minute writing time, and I really used it to actually write on some thoughts, just some creative nonfiction that I just hadn't taken the time to do. And it sort of was saying, yeah, you get to do that right now. And then you can share or not afterwards, but it's a nice space to do that. So thank you again, everyone. Thanks everyone in the audience, everyone who came to hear. Thanks to our speakers again, Jennifer, Reem, Anita, fantastic shares. And I will see you in the writing room in about 5 seconds. Thanks again.